How's it going, gamers? I'm Pruitt. This is Jim Davis. If you ever been in the woods and felt like something was watching you, it's probably that awakened tree over there, and it's a huge pervert. Watch out for that. Let's get to plants and plant monsters on WebDM.
It is a huge pervert.
It's got wood. Let's have a conversation about plants.
About plants.
And see where it branches
the
to.
oft-forgotten and maligned monster.
Right.
A lot of times they're seen as sort of silly or stupid or like, oh, it's a plant, what are you going to do with it? Or there's images of sort of Little Shop of Horrors and it's a silly...
Feed me, Seymour! Yeah,
That's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I find that plant monsters are interesting. First off, there's a lot of them. If you look at the monsters by type, there are a lot of plant monsters.
There's quite a few.
They're kind of all over the place. They range from the sort of shriekers and gas spores and things like that, which are
violent fungus.
Yeah, they're just sort of there, and they're more hazards than monsters. But they're nevertheless in the monster manual. To ones like Treants and Shambling Mounds that can pose a significant threat to the party if they're not prepared to fight them. The thing that I like the most about plant monsters is a couple of things. I like the idea of the woods and nature come to life and hostile and aggressive, and not in a silly happening kind of way, but in a
what do you want from us?
What do you want?
I'm so sorry.
But in the sense that like a D&D world is filled with spirits and filled with the potential for anything to have a sentience and to be animated, not just be a monster, but be more than it is.
An extension,
through magic.
An extension of something else.
An extension of something else.
It's in even our own mythology, like an earth spirit, a Gaia, something that suffuses all of nature, right? Bringing it together.
So I like that. I like that about plant creatures, and to me, it hints at this larger world in D&D where everything has a spirit. And some classes can interact with that. Maybe it's the druid, and you choose to interpret their plant-based spells as coaxing and convincing and cooperating with those spirits, or not, or maybe cajoling, coercing, forcing those spirits. But that there is also a sort of collective plant unconsciousness or mind that encompasses the world, or the prime material world that your campaign takes place on. Whether that's represented by the green or a parliament of trees explicitly drawing on Swamp Thing.
Swamp Thing, man.
Or more like the Avatar swamp creature presence from Last Airbender.
The tree at the heart of the swamp.
The tree at the heart of the swamp.
He can communicate and see through whatever. I mean, Aang does get a little druidy in that episode.
I mean, absolutely, he does. Plant creatures suggest at this larger world, and the plant creatures that are in the monster manual play up on that. So the blights, with their connection to the Gulthias tree, and the fact that if one of these ends up growing in a forest, it takes over that forest. It sends its roots and branches out. Corrupts everything. And now you have relatively low-level creatures. Blights aren't going to be a threat to anyone outside of the first tier for the most part, unless they show up in huge numbers with other creatures in a more central role in the encounter.
Yeah, which happened to us recently in our Curse of Strahd game.
Right, yes. I mean, so there's something like 20-something blights come out after us, and for the most part, we're able to... They're hindrances. They're, sort of like grappling us or trying to keep us pinned down, while the real threats are there to be dealt with.
That's why Banishment's such an amazing spell.
Right.
Because the giant awful thing that they were summoning...
Whatever those druids were summoning.
Whatever the druids were summoning, we didn't care and wait. I just banished it.
Right.
Now, if I hadn't have done that, those blights would actually probably have been a problem. Those vine blights.
They probably would have been a real problem.
Pulling people to the ground, yanking them prone.
So I think we're talking about the blights in a mechanical sense. They're there for tier 1 characters, but the environment that they create, and having like this tree that's at the heart of a forest that's a corrupting influence on it. Well, where have all the normal animals in this forest gone? Who knows? It's filled with wargs and manticores and hydras and just these creatures of the forest and wilderness that are nasty and mean and not normal or not natural.
Right.
And so it's a corruption of the natural world in the same way that something like a Shambling Mound is a corruption of the natural world. So the plant creatures, for the most part, that are in the monster manual have this kind of corrupting sort of nature on them, but they also are there to create an environment that other monsters can thrive in and that the party can go and adventure in.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess to me, the big takeaway that I would suggest to DMs looking to incorporate plant creatures either in a campaign that they're setting up or an environment or an encounter is to just think of them as more than just animate shrubs and trees, and think about their connection to the larger world. Is there a way to work them in and have sort of a mythology to them or something different about them?
So there's blights. You also have awakened trees and shrubs. And like you said, these are just trees and shrubs.
Trees and shrubs. And so they're usually, it's the result of an awakened spell that's been cast by a druid, but not necessarily. It could be something that a treant does. What's the difference between a treant and an awakened tree? Looking at the monster manual, the treant is something that has spontaneously awoken itself.
Right.
And not relied on a druid coming by and sort of bringing that spark to life, but that they're trees that have been around long enough or who have been sufficiently suffused with magic to spontaneously animate and become self-aware.
And now they're woke AF.
Yes, absolutely.
You know.
And they can wake other trees. And so I think that what you can do with a treant or with an awakened tree or shrub is have a connection that your druid has with the larger world.
Yeah.
Maybe your druid tends a grove where young treants are kept as saplings and older treants are sort of there on hand to help bring them into the world. But your druid is also there to make sure that it goes according to plan and that they're a part of a long line, centuries of druids who've kept this grove and kept it sacred.
What if you awakened a Gulthias tree?
I mean, who knows what kind of shenanigans it would get up to and what sort of horrific things it can do. Certainly, you wouldn't do no worse than to start with the stats of a treant and then sort of give it innervating effects or negative energy kind of things. Maybe pull some interesting things from vampire that it can do. Maybe it can sap blood through its roots or something like that.
Sorry.
No, it's great.
Sorry for the tangent.
And I think that I think that that's a good way to think about the monster manual. The monster manual is a starting point, and so if we're looking at some creatures like plant monsters, and we're saying like, okay, what can I do with these things? What if you have a hedge maze that you use every plant monster that you can think of, just slightly retweaking them and reskinning them, and you just describe it as the hedge maze has come to life and is attacking the party, or just trying to oppose them. Something like a Shambling Mound is an incredibly dangerous creature for a party that's not ready to fight it, or that doesn't know the trick to defeating it.
Well, at least the one thing not to do.
At least the one thing not to do. But even then, there's a way, like a Shambling Mound has there's a root or a branch deep inside of it that you have to destroy in order to kill this thing. Otherwise, it will reform itself over a matter of days. If you shoot lightning at it, that's not going to be a good thing. It's going to end up healing it.
No, not at all. That actually happened. That happened to us.
That has happened to us in the campaign.
My first D&D campaign ever.
Yes.
When I was playing Rockard White Springs, I think it was Corey's monk got sucked into it.
It got engulfed and was.
And then Josh was like, I'm gonna cast lightning bolt, and he did. And we had it down past half and healed it all the way almost
the way to full. I believe there were
like
2 Shambling Mounds in that encounter.
Anyway.
So I mean, those are the kinds of stories that these trick monsters like that, where every now and then you come across and you get one of these monsters and the players do something that's absolutely what they shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And it triggers this. Because otherwise, how many times are you going to end up with a lightning spell that you shoot at one of these things? Lightning isn't that common compared to, say, fire.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
And one would think, something that's plant-based, use fire. So as a DM, be an asshole and just switch its heal thing to fire.
You can switch its heal things to fire. You can say, it's fused with swamp water and all other kinds of swamp gases, and fire just invigorates it or something.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
magic.
It's magic.
Well, how does that work?
Who knows?
Magic.
It's a shambling piece of compost.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Shambling Mound, awesome. They have that great engulf ability. I love it. I'm just going to eat you right quick while I kick your friend's ass.
Right.
But let's move on to the Fungus Among Us.
The Fungus Among Us.
Yeah.
The humongous Fungus Among Us. I mean, Myconids are one of my favorite monsters in D&D because they're just like, first off, they're a little trippy and a little weird.
Well,
and they're just like, hey man, we're just hanging out down here in the Underdark. Don't try to harsh our mellow, and just like come and hang out with us for a while.
This.
Eat this.
I pulled this off my back to go back to Swamp Thing. There's a very particular book you need to read. Which one was it, Trav? What's the name of the story? I know you know it.
The one where they hallucinate.
Well, but there's a particular Swamp Thing story that you need to read where him and the girl eat some mushrooms off of his back and everything goes trippy and you have to start rotating the book because the panels start wrapping around the page like this and you have to literally read it like this. And it's like, you know, without taking mushrooms, that's kind of what it's like.
Right.
Not that I would know. But
so I think that Myconids have a lot going for them in terms of the role-playing encounter. First off, getting to them is going to be difficult. And it's one of the things that I liked about the Out of the Abyss, the background options that they had in the back, was that one of those options was I experienced a Myconid mind meld once, and I got to get back to it. And so
it's a different way of thinking.
It's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of experiencing existence and other people's consciousness or other beings' consciousness. And so that's what I like about the Myconids, is that they're not a monster that's there just to be fought. If you look at their stat block and the things that they can do, you're like, how would you create an encounter around this? Well, what if you have to fight through these things that are just clouds of spores that you're breathing in, and they're connecting with their mind and sending mental images to you and sending out pacifying, calming thoughts to you and trying to keep you from fighting them and invading your mind and forcing you to expand your consciousness as you deal with them. That's if you're an aggressive counter. Maybe you're going down there because you're like a wizard who's trying to, I don't know, experiment with mind magic, and the only way to do that is to get a bunch of Myconid spores and grind them up and snort them.
Or a sorcerer trying to expand his power.
Or a sorcerer trying to expand his power.
Jonathan Strange, where he's taking shit to go on crazy trips, but you just got to go down and get some of that sweet Myconid mushrooms.
Some sweet Myconid dust. And so so that's kind of like how I would approach Myconids. I like the way that they did it in Out of the Abyss. I like Neverlight Grove and the way the different circles played against each other.
It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that particular part of the adventure.
That's maybe a good way if you've never played that part of the adventure, or if you've run through it and you're looking to incorporate Myconids more, sort of like reviewing that section and sort of like showing you, okay, what happens in a Myconid colony when it goes bad.
Right.
What happens in a Myconid colony if if something goes wrong, or they try to take the party and keep them there against their will.
Yeah.
In Out of the Abyss, there's that one fungus that's like the size of a continent that's become sentient, self-aware itself. Those are the kinds of things you can do with plant monsters. It can be something that's greater than what it is and sort of speaks to a larger world that is alive and animated and interconnected.
Exactly.
That's what you can do with your games.
Also, a great reference for Myconids, Forgotten Realms novels. Going back to Drist. If you go to Exile, he has a whole part in there where he hangs out and is kind of friends.
Kind of friends.
They become allies with the Myconid colony.
Yeah.
And they return to it later in whichever. It's in the same one.
Same book.
It's the same book where they send out the Zenkarla.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I remember now. So I think that you don't even have to go to the Underdark to make use of things like Myconids or something like that. It could be that it's a dark cave and they're coming up from the cave and they're exploring the surface world during the night. The Dreamlands, maybe they call them, or the Waking World. I don't know what you would want to call them.
Yeah.
But something like that, and allowing for there to be role-playing encounters against these monsters that sort of don't end with the death of the monster. Poor monsters, always dying.
Yeah.
But that give your players a different experience of the world, and maybe inject a little wonder, a little amazement, in depending on how you role-play it, and letting them explore a world that lives and breathes and has connections to it, and not have it be just a fight against something. I don't know where I'm going with it. I like the idea of plant monsters, and I like the idea of them being interconnected somehow in the same way that kind of plant world is.
You've talked about Treants, but I'd like to focus on them a little bit because there is a lot more reference material. The Ints, obviously, from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and whether you play them like they are in Two Towers, and sort of like having them be the slow plodding
glacial thinkers.
How much of that you want to role play out with your party?
They have to literally grow their thoughts in their brain.
Just that idea that that when the Ints march to war, it's bad news for their enemies. And it can be the same for in the D&D world, that treants and awakened trees and the druids that tend their groves and all of these things, when threatened, when their natural world is threatened, they attack and they go and march. And now you've got a bunch of trees that are ripping up buildings and hurling giant blocks through the air and smashing orcs.
It reminds me of a campaign idea that I've had for some time and I really want to do.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about.
No, go
it's
for
the
it.
one. It's the one where you're in a vast forest and the last elves are retreating from the encroachment of humans. Like humans have just arrived in this area and they're just chopping trees down, right? And the elves don't have enough. So what do? They just start awakening animals and trees and shrubs and basically telling them, we have to go get our brethren from the far realm, or wherever the elves are originally from. We'll be back.
We'll be back.
But you need to hang on to the forest for as long as you can until we return.
Just like rise up out of the entire forest rises up to attack the
to try to hold off these encroaching humans that just want to chop trees down and make war and metal.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't know. It's just something about that. But
No, I think it's a good idea because it's number one, it kind of switches the tables a little bit. It sort of shuffles the board in terms of who's the enemy, who's not. Particularly if we are playing, or the players in your campaign are playing those awakened animals and those awakened plants, and just to give your players an opportunity to do something different. What happens when they play an awakened bear? Would you let your player play a treant? Those are the kinds of things they can do, and it's, for groups they're jaded, or jaded isn't the right word, but they're seasoned. Yeah. They've seen it all. They've played everything in the player's handbook. Branching out and saying like, why don't we play a bunch of intelligent animals and plants, and you guys fight the humans, and sort of like Fern Gully it up in there.
Hell yeah, right?
And have a different kind of campaign.
Yeah. I would love to play in that campaign either an eagle that's a shifter druid.
Yeah.
So it's an eagle that turns into other animals, the whole its whole shtick is you don't know what its actual original form was.
Right. You just never know.
Because how would you know?
How would you know?
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Or just like some kind of something smallish, but do the most badass build you've ever built of a fighter type, and just like watching, just like I don't care what it is. It could be a fucking badger for all I care.
Right.
But it's a badger with like.
Badger, there it is.
That's like a totem barbarian that's raging and like
just going to town.
We keep hitting it and it's just not taking damage.
Like a honey bear.
Yeah.
Honey badger.
Honey badger don't give a fuck. But yeah, something like, I don't know, the idea of that just makes me happy.
I think it's a really cool idea, and certainly even if you're not playing from the perspective of the forest and the awakened creatures that are in there, you can reverse it and like you're fighting against that. Perhaps
some evil druids
are doing that to mess with civilization. I don't know. It's one of those things where I look and I see. I don't know how. I don't have any insight into how other DMs play their games, and perhaps plant monsters are featured quite heavily in most players' campaigns, or most campaigns for the players. But I don't see it so much in the published material or people talking about it online, and so I think it's like an underused monster that deserves some thought, and it doesn't have to just be like I said, like a little shop of horrors where it's sort of silly and weird. It can be connected to something bigger, and I don't know. I like Swamp Thing. I like the Parliament of Trees. I like the green reality of it. It's something that druids tap into when they're communing with nature.
Yeah.
And to connect, say, the druid spells with what's in the monster manual, wrapping that all up and tying it up in a neat bow that fits, and creating an environment for your players to play in. That's what, to me, is the most fun about the game, and that, I don't know.
Right.
That's where plant monsters fit into it.
Exactly, and also when it is in published materials, like Curse of Strahd.
Right.
And then you immediately get the weapon that is great against those monsters, but you'll never see him again.
But you're never going to see him again.
It's like, hey guys, when you're writing an adventure, maybe include the Giant Slayer before you get to the Giants.
Before you get to the Giants.
Not in the Giant's horde.
The Dragon Slayer's sword is always in the Dragon's horde.
And you kill the dragon.
That is a tongue twister. The Dragon Slayer's sword is always in the Dragon's horde.
Yeah.
There you go. All right.
Nice. Say that 5 times fast and you get a Dragon Slayer.
we had
one
planned
show
for.
left.
This is 7 shows. We've got 7 shows tomorrow.
What time is it?
It's only 7:43. We're doing okay because we'll be done a little after 8.
That's great.
See, Jim, this is how it's done. Yeah.
Which one were you
next to
aiming
the trash
for?
can. So all I got to do is get up and go over there and put it in the trash can later.
You can.
Boom.
Booyah.
Ain't quitting my day job.
Oh man. All right, Treant.
You guys are good. Here we go.
Twig. A little twiggy.
Little Twiggy.
Little twiggy vine. Little twiggy, a little vine. Hey, Jim, what are we going to talk about tonight? Same thing we talk about every night, Pruitt.
Same thing we talk about every night, Pruitt.
Trying to DM the world. Oh!
Take over. Wait, no, trying. Wait, talking about. Wait. Charlie Sheen, Ben Vereen, shrink to the size of a lima bean.
I think. There it is. Oh.
We're talking about taking over the DM world. Wait.
All right. Pruitt, clap one time. Jim, clap one time. What are you guys talking about?
Plant
Talking about
monsters.
plants. Plants monsters. Getting up in the business. We have a whole little part where we're gonna talk about Swamp Thing. That Trav's gonna love.
You've got to make sure you call him a muck-encrusted mockery of a man.
Muck encrusted mockery of a man.
Mockery of a
That's what he
man.
is.
Does somebody tell him that?
It's constantly said around him. And he constantly refers to himself as a muck-encrusted mockery.
I've only read some Swamp Thing, but the one where he fucking takes shrooms off his back and you gotta fucking turn the book to read it. Anyway, we're getting ahead of. We need to talk about this in the show.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Hang on, let me just start.
Ready? Okay.